And thank you to Shelf Life Books for organizing and the Writers Guild of Alberta for putting the event on together. My name is Marco and I'm speaking to you from Edmonton, located in Treaty 6 territory. And I'm really excited to facilitate this evening's conversation with Uzoma Uponi and Lorna Shultz Nicholson. Unfortunately, Kyla Pannon was also supposed to be here to promote her new book, Stalking Shadows, but she was unavailable to make it. But please take a look out or look out for her book, Stalking Shadows. Before I invite Uzoma and Lorna and provide a quick bio, I just wanted to provide a quick overview of the format for tonight's event. We have about an hour together, and after I introduce both Uzoma and Lorna, they'll each read an excerpt from their book, and then I'll ask them a few questions and have them converse amongst themselves. About halfway through, if anyone in the audience has a question, you can pop it into the chat, and I'll do my best to get to as many as I can. I'll remind you about halfway through as well. And thank you in advance to June again and to Dorothy Bentley, who's not here, but for all the background work to set up the event. I think all your mics are muted. I think we've kept all the mics muted, but just in case if it pops on, just make sure to keep your mics muted. So now I'm going to introduce Uzoma and Lorna, and I'll start with Uzoma. Uzoma is the author of ColorSTRUCK, and she gained a reputation as a gifted storyteller when her debut novel, Colorblind, was a finalist at the Commonwealth Writers' Prize. Her novel, Whispers from Yesteryears, is a sequel to Colorblind. Through her stories, Uzoma lends her voice to the growing African narrative and introduces readers to some of the cultural beliefs that have shaped contemporary African lifestyles. Uzoma and her husband, Matthew, are parents to 4 children and make their home in Calgary. Welcome, Uzoma.
Thank you.
And next, I'd like to introduce Lorna Shultz Nicholson, author of When You Least Expect It. And Lorna has published children's picture books, middle grade fiction, YA fiction, and hockey nonfiction, and adult nonfiction. Her books have been nominated for many different awards and are often on the CBC's Best Books for Kids and Teens. Lorna loves traveling and presents at libraries and schools all over North America to inspire children and teens to love reading and writing as much as she does. Lorna lives in Edmonton with her husband. Go Oilers go. A dedicated fan to be able to say that. And a sort of naughty puppy she rescued from Mexico. Welcome, Lorna.
Thank you very much, Marco.
Before we get to the readings, I wanted to share how much I enjoyed all 3 books, including Kyla's. While the settings and stories couldn't be more different, from the cities of Nigeria in ColorSTRUCK to an 18th century French town in Stalking Shadows, to a small rowing community of the small rowing community of Bracebridge, Ontario. I was struck by how each book delved into the themes of family, fitting in, race, discrimination, secrets, curses, blessings, and the perseverance of each book's female protagonists. If you haven't already, I recommend you order a copy from Shelf Life Books. Now I would like to invite Uzoma and Lorna both to take turns reading an excerpt from their book, and I'll invite Uzoma to start us off by reading a few pages from ColorSTRUCK.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. So I'm going to read a few pages. Like you said, maybe you did say about 4 or 5 minutes, so maybe about 5 minutes of reading. And I'm starting the book from my reading is from page 188, and I'll just read a couple of paragraphs from there. I'm taking the story from a scene at the police station where this guy, his name is Afam, has come to get an update on the efforts that the police were making to try to recover his niece that had been abducted. And so he goes, the police commissioner invites him to the police station, and then this is the scene that unfolds. So it's from page 188. He says, a ceiling fan above his head worked hard to provide some cooling for the room, but only ended up making loud screeching noises and circulating hot air. The wall to his right was adorned with portraits of the state governor, the Inspector General of Police, and the State Commissioner of Police. The opposite wall seems to have been turned into a blackboard of some sort, serving as an official portal for registering the number of suspects being held in the station's detention facility. Police uniforms in different states of disorder hung on the walls. He would not have been here if he wasn't so desperate. The whole atmosphere was depressing. It did not give him any confidence that the police department could help him find his missing niece. It was already 3 days since she had been abducted, and with every new day, his fears that she may have been killed was mounting. If she was to be found, he did not think these policemen would be the ones to do the job, but he had no choice. After what seemed like an eternity, another policeman came into the charge room and shouted his name. Afam got up and followed him through the crowd into an air-conditioned hallway. They turned into the last door, on which a sign read, Abu Kwaku, Divisional Police Officer. A policeman with a fierce-looking German shepherd stood guard in front of the office. The chief waved him into a seat and asked, "Did you bring the photographs?" "Yes, sir." "Good." He took a sip from a coffee cup and ruffled through a file on his desk. "We got a lead this morning." Afam nodded. "The student, did she really see anything?" They had spoken on the phone this morning about the young girl from the school who had come forward to say she had seen Kamdi get into the abductor's car during recess that Friday afternoon. "Oh yes, she did. That Cecilia is a very smart little girl, only 8 years old, but she's as sharp as a needle. She remembered the vehicle number, the color of the vehicle. She even told us the car type and model." Afam's heartbeat quickened, and I think she's right, but now we have another problem. Afam waited for him to continue. "The owner of the car is well known to us." Sir, how is that a problem? Aren't you going to question him?" "Unfortunately, no, it's too risky." "What?" "That car belongs to a man we suspect to be one of the leaders of the organized crime mafia in Port Harcourt. They are a band of armed robbers and assassins. They work for many politicians, so they are virtually untouchable. We suspect that they are the gang that recently abducted and killed 3 people and harvested their kidneys for some high-class clients. It was all over the news. I'm sure you heard about it." Afam's heart sank. "But what are you saying? I know it's hard for you to accept this, but by now, your niece is likely dead, whether in the hands of the kidnappers or of those that sent them. If I was confident that she's still alive, we could try to get involved, but why risk the lives of my officers on a hopeless venture?" Afam sucked in a deep breath, anger and shock warring in his heart. He stretched out his hand towards the inspector. "But aren't you even going to try? She might still be alive. There is no body yet." Mr. Kwaku grabbed his coffee and got up from his chair. He avoided looking in Afam's direction as he walked to the window and drew the curtains aside. Afam watched in frustration as he slowly drank the remainder of the coffee and placed the cup on the windowsill. "Oga, please, sir, you have to do something. I beg you. What if it was your own child that was missing? Wouldn't you put up a fight? Wouldn't you want to bring her abductors to justice? To take them off the streets and ensure that they didn't kidnap any more children?" Mr. Kwaku addressed Afam's questions as he walked back to his desk. "We certainly can try if you would like us to, but you will have to bear the financial cost of the operation yourself. You see, Mr. Izuwa, all the stories you have heard about the police force are true. We have guns, but no bullets. We have police cars, but no petrol. And we have officers that have not been paid for months. If you can sponsor this operation, we can go after them. Even if she's dead, we can find out what happened to her. And maybe, just maybe, we can arrest some people." Afam felt as if someone had put a dagger deep into his heart. He felt dizzy and closed his eyes for balance. Countless stories about the ineptitude of the state police he had heard over the years had never bothered him because he had never had a police case. Now he was experiencing it firsthand. Police is your friend indeed. These people were not prepared to inconvenience themselves to answer the call for a citizen protection that was supposed to be their occupation. How could he go back to his nephews to tell them there was nothing anybody could do to locate their sister? They were still praying, hoping to see Kamdi home soon. How could he shatter their dreams? I think I'll stop here.
Thank you, Uzoma. That was such a good passage to pick from. Not to give too much away of the story, but that's, you know, towards the height of, you know, what's trying to be resolved, and really highlights, you know, as I was reading your book, that passage and a number of other passages really highlight, I think, what's happening in Nigeria and many other countries with the systemic problems or the corruption or the collusion or you know, just the average citizen. Where and how do they seek help? And if they don't have money, what do they do? So that was a really frustrating but eye-opening part of the book that, yeah, you have a lot of moments like that in the book. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Now I'd like to invite Lorna to read a passage from When You Least Expect It.
Thank you, Marco. I'm going to choose the very first chapter, and it's the very end of the chapter. And just to give you a little context, Holly, my protagonist, is a teen. She's trying out for a national rowing team, and she's in a race. And if she doesn't win, it's called a seat race. If you read, you'll find out what that exactly is. And if she doesn't win, she's not going to make the team. And I'm just going to read a little, because at the back there is a glossary of terms. And a seat race is used for crew selection, is an evaluation of one rower against another rower by comparing them. A coach will line up 2 or more boats, has the rowers row a measured interval, and notes the difference between the boats at the end. Then the rowers make a switch. The coach will then row an identical piece and note the difference again. If one rower continually makes the boat go faster, then they will be the one chosen. Holly has already raced one race and she's lost. So this race, she has to win. Bow seat, touch it up, please. Eleanor spoke to me. I pulled my oar just a little to help straighten out the boat for her. The wind was tricky today, coming from the port side, so the boat was being pulled. The water also had a bit of chop. My heart still pounded out of sync with the chop. Even though my throat was dry, I couldn't take a sip of water now. Okay, Bow, that's good, she said. Rowers ready? She spoke in this clear, calm voice, so unemotional. She was following the rules. I didn't know Eleanor that well, as we didn't even live in the same province. She was from Halifax, Nova Scotia. She had been instructed by the coaches to call the race with no emotion, so there was no advantage. Normally, the coxswains were the motivators, coaches in the boat. Not today. With my oar in the water, I was ready. Please just start the race already. Beside us, the motorboat chugged, the gas fumes circulating in the air. Boats, are you ready? One of the coaches called out from the motorboat. Ready, said Eleanor. I sat tall, focused on that elastic in front of me. The next thing I heard was the beep of the starting horn. Half, Eleanor called out. I drove my legs hard, pushed back, snapped my knees, got my oar through the water and out, using my wrist to turn the oar, flatten it up the slide again. Half, Eleanor spoke with authority. Another half stroke. Again, I pushed back, helping to move the boat forward. 3/4, longer stroke. The first few seconds had my heart rate in overdrive. The water churned beside the boat, little swells that slapped against the side of the shell. My legs pushed down. My hands moved around and out over my knees. I started up the slide again, following the rower in front of me. Where was the other boat? A lookout of the boat could cause disruption, unnecessary movement, seconds on the time clock. Only the coxswain could look. Half, Eleanor spoke rowing language. Sitting at 42, she said. We had the boat moving at 42 strokes per minute. No wonder I was gasping, high for a 4. That high a stroke rate usually only lasted for the start. Full. I drove back hard on that first full stroke of the race. My breath was as frantic as the pace. Everything needed to slow down, catch the cadence so I could breathe. Give me 10 hard ones, said Eleanor. We'd done our 5-stroke start, and now the boat needed momentum, and the 10 hard strokes would do that. She started at 1. Where was the other boat? Don't worry, keep pushing, keep driving. 9, up the slide, push back. After she called out 10, we settled into our race rhythm. We're at 34, she said, bow, take over the race. Eleanor talked calmly. Now I had to call the race, me. Those were the rules in a seat race. I would call, and so would Kira. Eleanor would only give us where we sat in comparison to the other boat. The pace was okay, and I was hanging in there. Was everyone else? After the 10, we seemed to settle too much, though. Sure, the boat took on a rhythm that I was comfortable with, but maybe too comfortable. They've got half a boat on us, said Eleanor. Half a boat already. I had to do something. Take it up, I called from the bow. The rower sitting in the stern in stroke seat, the seat that dictates the pace, accelerated. And I dug in hard to follow, pushing, sliding, pushing, sliding. We hit the 500-meter mark. There was still 1,500 to go. There's still a half a boat ahead, said Eleanor. 20, I called out. Come on, 20 hard strokes. Did I do the right thing? 20 at the 500 mark was risky. Please make it the right thing. We pushed through the 20, then the boat fell flat. I could feel it. Fatigue set into my legs, my hips, my upper body, my brain. Finally, 1,000 meters, halfway done. My breathing was ragged, my legs were on fire, quads burning with every stroke. Should I call for another hard 20? I could see the other boat out of the corner of my eye, but it wasn't good. They were definitely ahead. Come on, keep going, Holly. 20, I called out in a gasp. The boat picked up a little. My legs seared and my breathing was like rapid burst, in and out, in and out. Keep going, Holly, you can do it. Dig, dig, dig. 500 meters. Less than half a boat, said Eleanor. We were catching them. Could we? I had to push just a little harder. Last 250, said Eleanor. Take it up, I yelled. We were moving, pushing. Could we do it? The horn blared, announcing a boat was across the finish line, then a second horn. That's the end of the first chapter.
Thank you very much, Lorna. And great selection, great reading, great selection. Especially we, as readers, we're just plunged right into what sets the course for what the book is about and Holly's journey for that summer that the book is based on. So, and there's a lot of scenes on the water. So as I was reading it, I always thought back to that first scene or that first chapter and what had happened to Holly then. So thank you for starting us off with that one. So the first question I wanted to ask both Uzoma and Lorna is for each of them to share a little about the origins of their book. So what interested you in the story you explored, or what was the inspiration, spark, or need to write this story? I'll start with Uzoma.
Okay, thank you. So I think it would surprise you to know that in many parts of Africa today, there is still lots of superstitions and lots of activities that, people in the West are not even, they can't even think about. So I chose to talk about albinism because there's a lot of superstitions and perceptions about and discrimination that happens when people are born with the albinism in Africa. In some cultures, they actually revere them, because they think that they are not human beings. They think that there is something mystical or mythical about them. And so some people they afford them so much power. Some people actually look down on them. There's something, if people think really that these people are not human beings, that there is something godly about them. And recently in modern times, some witch doctors, they've convinced people that albinos, that they have, that the blood of albinos can actually be used in magic potions to cure diseases like HIV, cancer, so people believe all this. So when people are sick, they go to the native doctors, to the witch doctors, and then they tell them, oh, you have to go bring the blood of an albino, bring their kidney or some of their organs. And so you find that they are being haunted all the time. Their lives are not safe, they're endangered. Actually, what led, the day I thought about writing this story is that I was reading up, I heard on the news on CNN actually, about this albino child that had been abducted and killed, and she had been butchered, and And it's just terrible things that happen to them. So I read about one story, and then I got the idea to write about, I started to think, what if? And then I also started to think that, people don't really know the extent of discrimination that still goes on back at home. And one of the reasons why I write is because I try to open that curtain, right? To show the world, so to speak, that some of these things are still happening. They don't talk much about it. They talk about all other kinds of discrimination, but back in Africa, there's lots of discrimination against like the people who are albinos, people who are dwarfs, and people who are even some language groups that people totally discriminate against. There are some they have some caste system, and so many things that happen there, and nobody's talking about them. So I feel that I'm privileged to be here in this part of the world, and that I can talk about these things. I can just like open the veil so that people can see, and what's happening out there, and to advocate for people who cannot speak for themselves. So that was why I wrote this story, to talk about albinism and talk about the discrimination that they still face today in certain parts of Africa. It's not everywhere, but in certain parts of Africa, they still, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. That just adds even greater. The story that you tell is very powerful. The stakes are very high too, because the Kamdi, the albino child in the book, is a child, and what starts happening in the story, the stakes are very high, and it feels very real. So to hear the inspiration and you drew from reality to tell this story and to advocate adds even more power to the story you told. So thank you for sharing that. Lorna, I'd like you to share a little bit about the origins of your book, the inspiration, the spark, why you needed to tell this story.
Thank you, Marco. I was a rower when I was young. I was a teenage girl who, and believe it or not, I'm going to age myself a little bit, but I was in the very first female crews that were able to row in the Canadian secondary, and it was called schoolboy regatta. It's not called that anymore, but it was called that. And girls weren't allowed to row. And finally, they allowed an 8 and a 4 into this regatta. And of course, being the athlete that I was, I loved sports as a kid. I joined for sure. I was going to row for my high school, and we got to row an 8 and a 4. And of course, the boys had the 8 and the 4 and the pair and the double and the single. And we got the 8 and the 4, which we were grateful for. And we weren't allowed to row 2,000 meters. We got to row 1,000 meters because they didn't think that we were quite strong enough to be able to row that far, which is really fascinating, right? So, but anyway, I ended up in my 4 and we won, which was really exciting. So it gave me the bug. And it's been a long time since I've rowed. I mean, I did coach as well. And I really wanted to write a book on rowing. The first chapter, Holly, I guess, I could give it away, but there's a little bit of me in Holly. And there's also a secondary story in the novel that is actually pretty difficult for me to talk about, but I used my writing to put that story across. And if you end up reading the book, if you end up buying the book and reading the book, thank you very much if you do. There's a question and answer period at the back that I answer some of the questions a little more in depth. But when I was coaching, I had a little bit of there was an evening where something happened. There was a tragedy that happened, and I've used a little bit of that to pursue this story and to write that second voice that is there. I don't want to say too much more about it. It could give the story away, but also it's an emotional time for me. So it's been 33 years since I've been able to take that story and actually put it into words. And I think sometimes the words have been a little bit of therapy for me for the grief that I felt during that time.
Thank you for sharing that, Lorna. As I read it, I quickly realized, and I won't give anything away to honor what you were just saying, but I felt that the story had to be written by somebody who knew rowing well, because the immersion into rowing, the rowing culture, the rowing language, and I know you have the glossary at the back, but I felt like as a reader, I got a real rich understanding of what it takes to be a rower. And then what you were alluding to, I think there's so many, the story has so much depth for Holly and the other characters in the book, but then the part that you alluded to that I didn't realize until the end, that has, again, you're drawing from some personal experience. Yeah, there's some really powerful questions that are raised and yeah, between the characters. So I encourage everyone to get the book if they haven't already got it, to read it and to learn more about what Lorna is alluding to. Not to give too much mystery, but it is very, very powerful, the experience of the rowers and the other characters in the book. And so Lorna, you kind of were touching on this, but I'm gonna ask this next question, which I think gets directly at both your books. Women protagonists. Each of your books centers around strong, determined, at times misunderstood, at times underestimated female protagonists. So in ColorSTRUCK, I think of what, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Uzoma, what Awale did for Kamdi, almost goes out of her way for to help Kamdi, and she doesn't know Kamdi. Or in When You Least Expected, as you were alluding to, Lorna, Holly Callahan, we follow her journey in the story, her setbacks and her successes. So what do you want readers to learn about their experiences, the obstacles they overcame, and their own successes? And Lorna, I'll ask you to start.
Okay, so I really wanted to write a book with a strong female character who persevered, who had determination, and really wanted to achieve a goal. I think that was really important for me. It was one of the #1 things I started with, was this strong female. I was reading a lot of books, and I think all books are necessary, but I felt that, we're often reading about characters who maybe are in a very, very dysfunctional sort of situation. And I wanted to write something that wasn't like that, but just had this really strong female character who really wanted to pursue a goal, and she wanted to accomplish it. And yeah, she has some setbacks, there's no doubt about it. And I wanted to showcase how with setbacks, you don't have to give up. You can find another way to move on, to persevere, and to achieve your goal. And that was really important for me with Holly. Does Holly, accomplish that in her setbacks? Does she do everything correctly? Does she do it all on board? Not necessarily. She is a teenager, and teens sometimes make choices that aren't necessarily the best choice. But in their mind, it is the best choice. So I just, I wanted to sort of get that in there as well, that she is a teen.
Mm-hmm.
I think I appreciate you adding that, Lorna, because I was getting frustrated with Holly at times in the book, but I think that frustration makes, that's a real character, that's a real person they're experiencing. So yeah, the things that she was doing at times, I was like, oh, but so you did a good job.
You just want to throttle her. You just want to go, yes. No, stop. But she's a teenager, and teenagers do things like that. They don't always make the right choices. They think they are making the right choice, but they're not necessarily making the right choice. But they have to learn, and they don't have any wisdom. They're still young. They don't have life experience yet. So they have to learn from all of those sort of mistakes that they make.
Yes. So Uzoma, I want to ask you the same question. So what do you want readers to take away from the women protagonists in your book?
So we have a proverb back home that says that if you think you cannot influence anything, if you think you're too small to achieve anything, you've never spent a night with a mosquito. So mosquitoes are really small, and you would think that they are not effective, but sometimes you don't even see them, but they can be deadly. So I think what I was trying to portray in Awele's life was that, don't ever underestimate yourself, that wherever you are, if you open your eyes and look around, there are problems there that you can solve. So which is what happens to Awele, because she feels that, okay, I want to help, what can I do? And there's a popular saying that says, you never know, maybe you were put in this position for such a time as this. So if you close your eye, you may not see those opportunities, but if you open your eyes, you can see that you can actually be, you can have maximum influence. You can have great influence, right? You never know. You never know what's happening. You never know how impactful your actions can be, but stay true to yourself and do the right thing. And if you do the right thing, and if you have a heart to serve and you have a heart to help, no matter, you don't have to have anything. It doesn't have to be something that you're doing because you want to get a reward, but just because you are being that neighborly human being, you're being socially conscious and watching out for other people, you find out that you can actually have maximum impact in people's lives. So that's what I was trying to say, that even though she wasn't aware of what was happening, but because she cared and she had faith and she was trying to do the right thing. So when an opportunity came, she didn't miss it. She could have missed that opportunity if she wasn't looking, if she wasn't like open to suggestions, right? But she had already said, okay, I'm going to just be the best that I can be. So for everybody, that's just my message there, that you never know how the little things you do can go a long way in impacting people's lives.
That's a great answer, Uzoma. And now Awale doesn't do it without her own personal risk. She takes a big risk, but like you're saying, she knew that this was the right thing to do, and so she does it. And again, not to give away too much from the book, but it's there's some great scenes with what Uzoma or what Awale does in the book. And I just wanted to comment. I also enjoyed in your book the little proverbs that introduce each chapter. And often I would read them, read the chapter and then go back and like, oh, that's a great way to summarize kind of the theme that comes through in that chapter. So the one that you just mentioned about the mosquitoes,
yeah.
I'm going to ask one more question, but before I do, I just wanted to remind or invite anyone from the audience, if you do have a question, I've got my chat open on the side here, so I'll keep an eye on it. And so if you wanted to ask a question for Lorna or Uzoma or both, pop it in there. And then after we talk about this next question, then I'll get to them. And yeah, as they come in, I'll ask them if you have any. So the next question that I wanted to ask is around family, or is about family. And family is a major theme in both books. The families we have, the families or family members that we lose, and then the family that we make is very different variations. So in ColorSTRUCK, Peter, John, and Candy are sent to live with an uncle who doesn't know them or know much about them, and they don't know much about him. And in When You Least Expect It, Holly struggles with the blended family that she feels that she's been dropped into, and how it affects her relationship with her own mother. Why was it important? Why was it an important theme to explore in your book? And I'll start with Uzoma for this question.
Okay, so family, that's interesting, because in Nigeria, and I think in many parts of Africa, our social world actually centers around the extended family. So your extended family is your family. So every man you see is either your father, your uncle, your son. Every woman is your mother, your sister, your auntie, your daughter. Every little boy you see is your son. Every little child every girl is your daughter. So we have what we call, is actually an official term that is used for the extended family system. It's our social structure. Because over here in the West, when you get sick, right, or if you need money, you go to the bank. If you're sick, you go to the hospital. If you need anything, there's something that's been built into the society to help you. But in Africa, especially in Nigeria, if you're hungry, you look for somebody you go to your family. If you need a loan, you go to your family. If you're sick, you go to your family. If we don't have foster care, we don't have right now. These days they have, but traditionally your family, the extended family looks after you. So there's no, you can't survive without your family back in Nigeria. If you don't have, you better go find one, find the family to belong, right? Because they are the ones that are out, that are there for you all the time. If you don't have a home, you go to somebody's home. Just the very fact that you're related to them, they have a responsibility for you. So the very fact that somebody is, if it's my uncle or my aunt, if anything were to happen to me, I know I have to go back home. If I went back home, even if I don't have a house of my own, I can trace some of my relations and say, the moment I present myself as their sister or their daughter or anything, they have an obligation to take me in. So in my books also, that's what I try to also portray. Some of these are some of those cultural things that are so meaningful and so impactful in the lives of the people that live back home. So the family, your family, especially the extended family, is where you belong. You don't even belong to your father or your mother. You belong to the extended family, the bigger family.
That's great. Thank you, Uzoma. And Lorna, how would you answer that question? Why was family an important theme to explore in your book?
I think the family was important because Holly was struggling, and it was a way, and I mean, I guess it came from when my daughters were, in high school, and I remember a lot of their friends coming over, and at the time there were friends that were involved in the blended family, and they would complain. I remember one girl complaining about her mother, about her stepmother, and she would go on and on and on. And then I would go to the soccer game because the girls played on the same soccer team, and I would stand with this stepmother, and I think she's a lovely person. Like, she was absolutely lovely. But yet this girl, this teenager, she didn't like her, because teens don't like to be disrupted in their family. And I think that teens need family. They need that. Now, Holly was very misguided with her family. She was very upset that her mother was going to, it's always been her mother and her father had abandoned her when she was very young. And so then her mother meets somebody and, moves her into this house with Stu, who's, she doesn't want him to be her stepfather. She never had a father, so she doesn't need a father. And then there's two boys. So her family has expanded. She's has this big family that she's trying to cope with. And I just remember all of those kids that were in blended families, and they were having a hard time with it. And I think, again, that's being a teen, right? They can't see past what's happening today. They sometimes don't work. They can't see that. And what's really interesting about it is when the book sold to Red Deer, my editor, Peter Carver, who's absolutely amazing, that's one of the themes that he really liked, was the fact that there was a blended family, because he dealt with that when he was young. And he said, I really related to Holly in this situation, and I was very much like her as far as that situation went. So there was the blended family. And I just think that a lot of kids are in blended families. So this is not abnormal. So I wanted to just show a situation where there was a blended family. And of course, in the end, there's a little bit of an arc that happens with the family situation that maybe if a teen was reading it and they were in a blended family and dealing with some of that, maybe they could see some good in their family.
That's great. Yeah, and both books, there's an element of that blended family, or inheriting a family, or becoming part of a new family that you weren't expecting, that disrupts you. And so both of your books covered that. So, but yeah, and so thank you for answering that. And so family was a big theme, but obviously not the only theme. So many other strong themes in the books. For example, secrets, discrimination, fitting in, faith, love, curses or blessings, depending on which way you want to look at something, and then obviously perseverance. If you had to pick one of those themes, which one was another theme that you felt was important to write about, or is there another theme that you wanted to highlight? And I'll start with Lorna this time.
Yeah. Well, I think perseverance was definitely a big theme in the book, but I think another theme in this book was the layers of grief. And I think that I think that everybody grieves differently, and I think that that's important. And I think it was an important theme in the book. So Holly is basically grieving, you know, the abandoned father. She's also grieving the fact that she didn't make the boat. She's grieving that she doesn't have her friends. And then there's even more grief than that that happens from, you know, losing a loved one. And everybody is at a different level of their grief. And not everybody can just snap out of it right away. Some people it takes longer. And I think that in our society, we just expect everybody to get over it immediately. And that's not true for everybody. I think that everybody needs to have their own process. And I really wanted to sort of show those layers of grief in this story. So I think that is another theme that is in the story.
That's great. Yes, grief, a great description about it too, Lorna, about grief and what Holly is trying to grieve, or, you know, resisting her grieving process. Uzoma, are there any other themes, or is there another important theme that you wanted to highlight?
Yeah, so of course I talked about discrimination. That's actually the main thing that I was trying to bring out there, because that's a message I want to bring out, that we still have all these people that are being discriminated against. I also wanted to talk about, I also wanted to bring out the faith of the lady who helped eventually, because I wanted to show her as somebody also who was really willing to help despite everything, who felt that she had she wasn't like taking things personal, she wasn't taking insults personal or anything, but she wanted to give of herself to other people. And I'm hoping that that came out clearly in the book as well, because that's also something I want people to think about and aspire, because we are not, part of our, I believe, this is my personal belief here, that part of our reason for being here is to help other people. And so we have a duty to help, to be good, to help other people, to help people who are less privileged than us. And yeah, so that's one of those things. And she could do that because she had a strong faith in both herself, in her God and everything. So just bringing out there that we can be of service. We are meant to serve other people. So
that's great. And there's a big thing that she does to help, but there are also smaller things that she does along the way too.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, that's a good theme. We have two questions so far. We still have about 12 minutes to go, so this is great. We're nicely on time. Also, if you haven't looked, Uzoma and Lorna, you have a lot of compliments on your reading, a lot of congratulations in the chat. So I just wanted to echo your fans are really appreciating you and your books and your readings. The first question I see here is from Karen. Is there a part of the writing process that you find especially challenging and or enjoyable? Uzoma, I'll start with you.
So my writing process actually starts with starts with reading. I read, like when I decide I want to write, I read and read and read and read. I read my favorite authors, right? Because I want to write like them, so and all that. But the challenge that I always find is right at the beginning, having to do a character analysis, because I try to get myself to imagine who these people are, what their names are, what is the meaning of their names, what is their philosophy in life, what are their greatest fears, and then, plotting is, I find that if I can understand who the characters are, the main characters, if I understand them, and if I can, in my mind, visualize the journey and write it down, having to actually write down the plot and do the character analysis, especially the character analysis, it's a big challenge for me, but I know that once I've got that down, I'm ready to write.
Well, great, thank you. Lorna.
Well, I think that that first draft is always really challenging. I mean, I'm a pretty linear writer. I go from A to B, and I try to get that first draft done, but sometimes you hit that middle and you think, yeah, this isn't very good. Who's going to read this? No one's going to read this. Nobody wants this. And so you have to go through that doubting process of this isn't good. Like, where am I going? I don't know what I'm doing. And then you just have to push through that section. And then when you get closer to the end, and And sometimes, you know, when I was writing this book, I actually thought of it like a race, like a rowing race, because that's exactly what happens. You get through the first half and you're okay. And then all of a sudden you hit the halfway mark and you're so tired. You just think, I can't make it to the finish. I can't do another half of this race. And so that sort of that 1,000 meters to 1,500 meters, just you sag. And then all of a sudden you get this burst of energy where you can finish. And that's very much like writing, where you get to that middle section and those little voices just come through and they tell you that you're not a writer. What do you think you're doing? You can't do this. And then you push through and get to the end. So I think that that's probably, and then once, the second half of that question, I think, was what do you enjoy? And I think once I have those bones down, then the next draft is fun, because that's when you take it and you mold it and you know, yeah, you cut and paste and delete? Yeah, sure you do. You know, you're moving stuff, you're maybe deleting a chapter, you're maybe deleting a paragraph or a character, but you've got something to work with. And so that's the enjoyable part, is when you have something to work with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Uzoma, did you want to add anything?
No, I was just
I like how you both explored two different parts of the process. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I was just agreeing with her. I find that the same thing. It's exactly the same thing that I feel. A lot of self-doubt, right? But I like I said, once I have the plot out, getting that first draft, like Lorna said, is very, very difficult. It's very, very difficult. But once you've got the draft done, you followed the character from beginning to the end, it's like, of course, that's almost, you know, that's like 1/4 of the work done in my experience. But then I really enjoyed that, then beginning to fine tune it and work with them and see where the story leads. Yeah, I think she's spot on.
Thank you. Uzoma, there's a question from Beverly for you.
Hi, Beverly.
And it says, one of the themes that runs through your book is that of the dissonance between Christianity and witchcraft. Does one dominate over the other in Nigeria in 2020?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
One of the themes that runs through your book is that dissonance between Christianity and witchcraft. Mm-hmm. Does one dominate over the other in present day Nigeria?
So what happens in Nigeria is that because we, and not just in Nigeria, in Africa, we have all these cultural and superstitious beliefs, right? And then in the midst of it all, the Christianity came. Christianity is an important, Christianity came to Africa, came to Nigeria. But then the people have still not let go of those things, right, that they believed in. And so you find that even in many people who are even Christians now, many of them still resort to, they still believe some of these things, you know, even though they are Christians, they still would, some of them I hear, some of them will still go and visit the witch doctors when the things are difficult. Some of them, you know, so there's a lot of corruption, there's a lot of poverty. And so even though the Christianity is there and we keep the light of the gospel keeps, people keep trying to shine the light of the gospel so that, you know, to stop some of these things. A lot of people are very poor. And so when they are poor, the natural thing actually for many people especially is to resort to what their ancestors have always done. So you find that there is this push-pull between the two, the culture, the traditional culture, the traditional religion, and the Christian religion. They keep going this way and that way, this way and that way. There's a lot of very, Christianity is very prominent also in Africa, but there's a lot of poverty. And because of the poverty, a lot of people still go back to the traditional religions. Yeah. But having said that, it's still Christianity that is trying to stop a lot of all these beliefs. It's Christianity that is trying to, you know, bring to end the discrimination against albinos. It's Christianity that's trying to stop the corruption, and, you know, people are still trying to make sure. But then there's a lot of poverty, and because people are poor, they do all kinds of things because of poverty.
Thank you for providing an answer and you know, telling us a lot more of, you know, some of those themes come through in your book, but yeah, for providing that context about Nigeria and what's happening. And I saw there was a comment from Robert who highlighted some of what you had talked about earlier, Uzoma. So if you get a chance to take a look at Robert's comment, thank you for adding that. We're starting to get ready to close. I have one more question for Lorna and Uzoma. If there's any other questions, I'll ask you to sneak them in quickly to the chat. But if not, I do want to ask Lorna and Uzoma before we close, if they would each share a final thought about their books, maybe something that they would like or hope that the readers take away, or any other tips about process or writing for aspiring poets or aspiring writers in the audience. So I'll start with Lorna.
Okay, so I'll answer that two ways. The first one is this may look like it is a sport book, but it's not. Yes, sure that the nucleus of it is sport, but there is so much more to the book than sport. It is a teen book. It is classified as a young adult book, but I know lots of adults who are reading who enjoy it as well. So I'm just going to say that. And I think sometimes sport books get classified only as sport books. So I would like to say that, a lot of sport books have something else to them. And I think it's really important that it's just a vehicle to actually tell the story. So that's one thing. Okay, so the second thing is about your writing. And if any of you are writers out there, I just want to say the book is about perseverance, and writing is very similar. You have to persevere, and you're going to get rejected. You're going to get told that maybe this story isn't going to make it into this magazine, or maybe you submit poetry somewhere and you get that rejection letter. I went through a lot of rejection letters before I got a book published, and I still get rejection letters. I've published 45 books, like traditionally published, and I still get rejected on stories. I can still send them out. Like at my agent, I can even give it to my agent and she'll say, no, sorry, that one's not going to sell. I don't think that story's going to sell. And I think, okay. So I just want to tell you to keep at it and persevere. And if it's a passion, then don't give up.
Thank you for answering. Thank you for answering both, Lorna. Uzoma.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say thank you so much, Lorna, for that. I will take that advice because I am not traditionally published. I have written, this is my third book that I've written, and every time I write, I keep trying to see if I can get a traditional publisher. I try and I try and I try and I don't in the end. But I'm not giving up. I don't give up. So I just continue. So, and the books I have written so far have been very, very well received. So I'm really glad. I don't know, maybe it's because of the subject matter that I write about. I try to write about Africa and about social issues, right? So maybe that's why, but otherwise I'm really happy with myself. Anyway, so
good. That's good.
yeah,
I think it's fabulous. You know what?
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you're traditionally published or self-published, you're still writing and you're still pursuing your passion.
Yeah, I'm very,
and
very
that's what's important.
Yeah. Thank you. So the only other thing I wanted to say about the books, not about the writing process. I said earlier that I try to write books that I try to talk at the social conscience of people to actually see what's happening in Africa. And I'm still going to be doing that. And that's what this book is actually about, seriously. And there's a lot of talk about, I know, Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, children's life matter, unborn babies' life matter, all kinds of people's lives matter. So I just wanted to add to that my story that albino lives matter, especially in Africa. So on a final note though, there is a charity there's a Canadian-based charity. It's called Under the Same Sun. Under the Same Sun. They have work, they are based in Vancouver, but the work is centered around albinos in Africa. And then the work is in Tanzania. So what they do is that there's a lot of, I think most of the albinos in Africa are in Tanzania. And that is where most of, the things I described in the book, that's where most of them actually happen, in Tanzania. So they have a home there, they have a mission there, they go and they have a mission for the albinos. They have like a camp where they keep them, many of them, when people drive them away from their homes, right? Because the families don't want them as well. So they in Tanzania, they gather them, they have a hostel for them. They have a camp where they keep them. And so they provide them with education, with everything that they need. So the proceeds from my book, actually, most of it is going to Under the Same Sun in Vancouver. So just wanted to mention that if anybody wants to ever support them, they're a very, very worthy cause. And I've had to send some money to them just to support them because I totally believe in what they are doing. So that's just on a last note. That's the charity that I'm supporting with the proceeds from this book. It's called Under the Same Sun. Thank you
for sharing that, Uzoma. That's really nice to hear about your book. So that brings us to the end. Thank you everybody for sticking around for a few extra minutes. Thank you to Beverly, Karen, and the others for the nice comments in the chat. So Lorna and Uzoma, if you get a chance, just take a peek. But again, thank you to Uzoma and Lorna for reading and for talking about their books tonight. I'd like to thank the Writers Guild of Alberta, Shelf Life Books, and June for hosting the event, for setting everything up. Dorothy, who wasn't able to make it, but for all the work she did behind the scenes. A reminder to everybody listening that you can purchase the books through Shelf Life Books. And finally, everybody for tuning in. Thank you for joining us on a nice night to talk about stories and engage with authors. I wish you all a very good night. Thank you.